Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at the brand new Warhammer 40,000 balance update. This video is sponsored by CMO Games. More on that later. Warhammer 40,000 balance update. Points changes are here with the new Munitorum Field Manual. Alright, so we got the long-awaited Munitorum Field Manual, so everybody was excited to see what these changes are going to be, so they can modify their lists, or start truly building a new list for a new army, and here we have them. So obviously the Tampa Bay Open was cancelled, but Games Workshop has taken all the data from all the other tournaments and dropped our new Munitorum Field Manual. So this is mostly going to be points changes, although there are a couple of rules and overall changes to the meta as well. Put down your dice and tape measures, stop priming those miniatures, and get your calculators and army building app ready. The latest balance update for Warhammer 40,000 is here. There's a Munitorum Field Manual update with additions to the FAQ and errata to iron things out. Here's what the Warhammer Design Studio have to say. For this balance update, the focus is on continued external and internal balance adjustments through the points adjustments. Overperforming units from the Adeptus Sororitas, Thousand Sons, Drukhari, and Space Wolves, particularly Thunderwolves, are receiving points adjustments to help bring them in line. So basically those are the main points increases. Orcs and Genestealer cults have been struggling a little since the release of the chapter approved per iNexus mission pack, so we have also made a few adjustments there to give them more options. So those are the primary armies that are going to be going down. But we also see a ton of points increases on units that have been taking overly represented, and then we see a ton of points decreases on things that have been underrepresented. So we'll check out that link in just a sec. The majority of factions are otherwise performing well against each other, and so most of the remaining changes are meant to help tackle internal balance, and we hope to see more variety in army lists as well. So basically inside of the individual codexes and indexes, anything that people are taking 3 or 6 of have typically seen a small points increase, while things that aren't showing up on the table are going to see some minor points decreases. So trying to get a little more diversity amongst the armies that people are taking. Updates to the FAQ and errata continue to answer questions commonly asked by the community, so people have a clear and official answer to play with. We have used this update as a chance to clean up surge moves, as there are quite a few variations of the different limits. We have standardized the rule to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So the big change to the surge moves is now it's once per phase. So if you have an Accursed Cultist unit or Carnifexes, something like that, that can normally surge every time the unit is shot or a model dies, now it's going to be once per phase. So there's no more pouring 3 or 4 units into a unit and then suddenly your opponent's unit is moving 10 or 12 or 16 inches across the battlefield. Now they're only going to get a single surge move. It's still really good because they can get closer to you, they can get into combat, or they can potentially dip into some cover or out of line of sight, but no more using that same surge move multiple times in a single phase. I think this is a great change. Our next update later this year will bring Balanced Status Slate alongside an updated Munitorum Field Manual, as well as any further additions that may be needed for the FAQ and errata. We are already well underway with testing the upcoming updates, making changes that are designed to tackle some key areas we want to address. Specifically, we're looking at miracle dice, usage and generation, cult ambush mechanics, and making a better experience for Codex Space Marine players, to name just a few. There's a lot of exciting adjustments planned, and we're excited to share these with you soon. So realistically, this is probably going to come in about 3 months, so I wouldn't really make any massive changes based on what's going to happen another quarter from now. We could see it sooner, but realistically, Games Workshop has been spacing these out quite a bit. So that being said, the main focus now is going to be the minor rules changes and then also points. And then also to note, we do have the official Blood Angels points out. So there were some points in the back of the codex, and then also we had the old points, but now we have the official new points for Blood Angels. And we'll have both of those links down in the description for all of the updated changes, which are clearly identified by Games Workshop. So if we just click that link, it's going to take us up to the recently updated. We have 35 big changes here. So you can see that there's the various indexes, codex, fac, and errata. But we're going to take a look at the actual Munitorum Field Manual. So obviously there are a lot of factions, so we're just going to take a brief look at each one and just kind of sum it up. So first we see Codex Adeptus Sororitas. So as we can see, massive red in here. So things like Battle Sisters and Zephyrum have gone down by a couple of points, but the stuff that we see typically spammed in people's lists or key characters that are often taken, we're going to see going up. So we see Morven Val up, Paragon Warsuits, Castigator, Dominions, Immolators, and then some of the Bringers of Flame enhancements have all gone up. So realistically, expect to see somewhere around a 50 to 100 plus point increase in your army if you're rocking Bringers of Flame. If you're rocking one of the other detachments, but a lot of these key units, maybe a little bit on the lower side. But overall, I think these are good changes, as you were just getting a lot with the Adeptus Sororitas. And then later on, we'll see how they adjust the Miracle Dice usage and generation. as obviously that mechanic is a little bit powerful. Now we've been seeing the sisters do well, but they haven't been dominating the top of the meta. So we'll have to see if this brings them back in line with like a 50% win rate. But overall, I like these changes. I think they were necessary. Next, we see Codex Adeptus Custodes. So not a ton of changes right here. We basically see a couple of the dreadnoughts going down, Trajan going down, and then also the Praetors going down. A lot of units that just weren't taking that often. So good changes right here. And then we see AdMech. They have gotten a ton of changes lately. I've played against some really tough AdMech lists. And realistically, the stuff that was getting spammed, like the Ballastaris, the Vanguard, the Skystalkers, and Sterilizers all went up. And then some of the units that you really weren't seeing, like the Electro Priests and a couple of the characters went down. I think overall pretty good changes. Probably not going to make a massive change to people's lists unless they were spamming some of these key units. Adeptus Titanicus, so basically the Titans, no changes here. And then we see Eldari. So interesting changes. Eldari have been extremely popular. Part of that is because they also have like the Fate Dice mechanic, which has been extremely strong. We know they're getting a Codex early in 2025. But we see some of the interesting changes here in the Falcon going down in points, Fire Prism going down in points, Shining Spears going down in points, Wave Serpent going down in points. But the most interesting one to me is the actual Wraith Blades and Wraith Guard going down, as they were extremely strong units. We haven't seen them run a ton, but they are very powerful. But the drops are only to the 5 model units. So if you're still taking the big model units, you're not going to see any changes. But if you're running smaller units, which most people don't do, we see them coming down. And that is an interesting change from Games Workshop, which we actually see like echoed in a lot of these changes, which I think is pretty good. Basically, if you're running the big units and you're buffing them and making them super powerful, your points aren't changing or maybe going up. But if you're just running like the min squads, no real changes here. I like that Games Workshop is now differentiating a little bit more between small units and big units. And then we see forgeworld, no changes here. And then moving on to Astra Militarum. So for the most part, not a lot of changes here. We see some minor drops in things like Scout Sentinels, which are pretty powerful, especially when you can bring them back for 2 CP once per game. But then we see some big increases in like the Tank Commander, who's shooting on death, very good. Also one of the few units that can actually issue orders to other tanks. And then the biggest change is to the Bullgrin. Most people were running either 2 or 3 big squads of these. So we see them going up to 220 points. A big change in the points for the Bullgrin. But with their -1 damage, feel no pain, and high armor saves, this actually doesn't surprise me. And then we see like some decreases to like the Ordnance Battery, Weapon Squads, and then the actual Ogryn. So for most people that were spamming Bullgrin or Tank Commanders, probably going to see an increase in points. But if you had a more diverse list, probably not going to see much of a change. And then moving on from there, we see Black Templars, Chaplain Grimaldus going up, Castellan and Marshal going down. And then we see the Crusader squads going up in points if you're taking the max squad size. And then the Primaris Crusaders also going up in points if you're taking the max squad size or the min squad size. So realistically, just not going to see those massive bricks of 20 guys that are super powered without paying a couple extra points. I think this is a good change. All right, and then we have the new Blood Angels Codex points. So keep in mind with the increases and decreases we see here, the red and green, it could be a little bit deceptive because this is actually based on what's in the back of the Codex, not the previous points. So we see Astroth for 105, pretty good character. We see the Bale Predator at 135, not bad, pretty mobile, but not exactly going to be like spamming these. We see the Blood Angels Captain at 80 points, Mephiston at 125, and he is extremely good. I think he is arguably the best lone op character in the game. Very, very good, very durable. Definitely going to be seeing him on the table. Then we see Commander Dante at 130, very good as well. We see the Death Company Captain at 70. We see the Death Company Captain with Jump Pack at 85. Death Company Dreadnought at 180. And then we see the actual Death Company Marines at 90 and 180 for 10. So very strong. Only 30 more points than the Assault Intercessor squads. Definitely going to be very powerful with all their extra special weapons. And then we see the Death Company Marines with bolt rifles unchanged at 90 and 180. Death Company Marines with jump packs at 130 and 240. So these are a lot cheaper than they used to be, but you're also not going to get as many weapon options. Still very strong, as I think you can take something like 5 special weapons in this unit, but no more spamming a unit of 10 of them. 240 is pretty realistic, especially if you attach a character. They're still going to be very strong. And I fully expect to see most people running 10 Death Company with jump packs, and then also Lamartis, who's coming in at 110. Very, very good character. Obviously, Blood Angels are going to be in a nice place here. Then we see the Sanguinary Guard at 135 for 3 or 270 for 6. Probably still a little bit on the pricey side. They're very good. They're definitely going to be on the table, but I'm not sure they're going to be like massively impactful. Then we see the Sanguinary Priest at 90. I expect to see a lot of these on the table, and the Sanguinor at 140. I think most Blood Angel lists are going to have the Sanguinor for sure, and probably 3 Sanguinary Priests. And then for the detachment enhancements, so we see the Liberator Assault Group, Icon of the Angel going up to 20, Speed of the Primarch going down to 25. So no massive changes here. Angelic Host, we see the Archangel Shard down to 15. And then we see all 3 of the other enhancements going up slightly. I still think the Liberator Assault Group is going to be the best detachment overall, but the Angelic Host is pretty good. And then we see no changes to the Lost Brethren. So the Death Company is probably the worst detachment in the new codex, but it doesn't mean it's not viable. Overall, I think these are pretty reasonable points changes, or like points overall for the Blood Angels. I do think they're going to be very strong. I don't think they're necessarily going to be broken, but I do expect them to be in one of the top performing Space Marine lists in the meta. So very, very cool. We finally got the Blood Angel points. Time to put these red, black, and gold boys on the table.
Now a quick message from today's sponsor. CMO Games has been selling Games Workshop products online for over 20 years. They carry the full line of Games Workshop products, including Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, paint tools, and more. Almost all Games Workshop products are priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games takes pre-orders for most Games Workshop products released at their earliest date possible. 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, they go live. Most of these pre-order products are also priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games offer free shipping in the US 48 with an order of $50 or more. Their customer service is top-notch and they ship most orders within 24 hours. Visit CMOGames.com using the affiliate link in the description and let them know that you heard about CMO Games from Warhammer Man. Now back to the video.
And then we see Chaos Demons. Not a lot of changes here. Beast of Nurgle going down, and then Shalaxi actually going down as well. She is very good. And then we see one change that's going up, the Renmaster on Blood Throne. Not really that big of a deal, as it's basically most people that are running an all-corn list probably have like 2 of these guys. So really only like a 30-point increase. But for the most part, Demons unchanged. And then we see Chaos Knights. So we see a couple of points changes to the big Knights going down. And then we see 5-point changes to the War Dogs for the most part. So the Carnivore stayed the same at 140. But the Stalker, the Huntsman, and the Brigand all going down by 5 points. So if you're running an all Armiger list with like 12 or 13 of these bad boys, you're going to be able to take a couple extra enhancements, maybe squeeze in one more of the Little Knights. Overall, nice changes. And then we see Chaos Space Marines. So Abaddon the Despoiler going down by like 15 points. We see the Accursed Cultist and then also the Dark Commune Blob going up by a few points. So probably going to cost you about 40 more points to run a brick of those. So the people out there that were running 3 bricks of those going to see like a 100+ point increase. But everybody else probably going to balance out with all the points decreases. And then we see a bunch of units like Havocs, Warp Talons, Legionaries, Predator Annihilator, Terminators all going down in points. Obliterators, Possessed, Raptors, Sorcerer, and Terminator armor, Vashtor going down in points. Also some stealth buffs to Vashtor as well. I think for the most part, this is not really going to change most people's lists unless they were running like a very skewed AC/DC army or something like that. All right, and then we see some minorly impactful changes to Dark Angels. So we see Azrael going up by 10 points. I think this is pretty reasonable as he's one of the best Space Marine characters in the game. We see Deathwing Knights going up from 235 to 250. So basically back to where they were, which I don't think is a bad change considering they got like a bunch of actual buffs to their data sheet. And then we see the Vengeance going down, Lionel Johnson going down to 285. So another points decrease on him. I think realistically, we're probably going to see more of the Lion on the table, which is definitely awesome. Ravenwing Command Squad going down, Samael going down. So not some crazy changes right here. The most important thing I think is the Deathwing Knights going up 15 points is not going to make you not take them. Same with Azrael. But the Inner Circle Companions now are looking extra juicy with no points changes. I think realistically, you might see one less unit of Deathwing Knights, so maybe 2 of those now instead of 3, and then potentially seeing the Lion in the list, or a lot more lists probably running multiple units of Inner Circle Companions as they absolutely slap. So very nice changes right here. Not too crazy, but I think bringing the Dark Angels to where they probably should be. If you're running like a super meta list or something like that, between the Space Marine changes and Dark Angel changes, probably going to see somewhere around like 50 to 100 point increase, which I think is pretty reasonable, especially if you're running the Gladius detachment. And then we see Death Guard, not a lot of changes here. Biologus going down a couple points. Mortarion down to 300 points. We probably see more of him on the table, but I think the Death Shroud Terminators is actually pretty good. 6 of these guys for 220 now. I think it's pretty realistic to think we might be seeing 18 of these bad boys on the table. So good changes for Death Guard. Then we see Drukhari. These have been performing extremely well lately. I was just at a GT where Drukhari took first place. We see a lot of points changes to the stuff that was being taken, and then 1 minor points drop for the Hellions. So Drazar, Court of the Archon, Beastmaster, Archon himself, incubi, Lilith, mandrakes, and reavers all going up in points. I think these were good changes as they got a lot of rules changes recently with the new detachment. And even though they're sort of like a glass cannon, they hit really hard. So I think basically getting like one less unit is probably not going to impact them a ton, but bring them more in line with where they probably should be. So good changes for Drukhari. And then next we see GSC. So overall, GSC are pretty strong. It's taken people a little bit of time to like sort out the codex, but very surprised to see these massive points drops on GSC. So small units aberrants going down, acolyte hybrids with auto pistols all going down, acolyte hybrids with hand flamers all going down, icon ward, jackals all going down, benefictus going down. We also see the alphas going down, and then the outlander claw, we see one of the enhancements going down. So probably not going to be massive changes to GSC. They were already pretty strong in the hands of a good player, but I'm also biased because the #1 GSC player is on my team and he is very, very hard to beat. But that being said, probably going to see like one extra character or one extra small unit in a GSC list. But overall, I do like these changes, except for when I'm on the other side of the table from him. But I think realistically, the changes to the neophyte hybrids and then also the primus are probably the biggest changes here, as we're probably going to see more people running 20 bricks of neophyte hybrids with primus or benefictus attached for like the lethal hits and sustains when they come in from deep strike. Definitely going to be very powerful. And then for Grey Knights, just a couple of changes. And the important thing to note here is the Terminator squads, if you only take 5, went down, but the 10-man stays the same. And then also the Paladins, if you only take 5, went down, but the 10-man stays the same. And then Purgation squads coming down a bit. So not really going to affect most Grey Knight armies, as they're mostly taking like the big bricks of Terminators or Paladins. Imperial Agents have no actual changes unless you're taking the Subjuctor squad outside of the Imperial Agents, just going up by a couple of points. And then we see Imperial Knights, a couple of the big knights that you don't see often going down by a couple points, but most importantly, Canis Rex going up by 15 points. So this is going to affect anybody that was taking Canis Rex as like an ally, or any knights list pretty much that was taking Canis Rex, which is basically all of them. So maybe going to cost you like the usage of one enhancement or have to shift a couple things around, but not really massive changes. I think this was in line as Canis Rex was extremely good. And then we see Leagues of Votan. So if you were taking these smaller Hearthguard squads, went down a couple points, but the big squads staying the same. And then also the Jaegers going up by a couple of points, which makes sense because they were a little bit undercosted, but not really going to affect most people's lists here. And then we see some changes to Necrons. So the most important thing changing right here is basically the stuff people weren't using going down a couple points. The stuff people were using going up by a couple points. Not going to massively affect most people's lists, but I think of note, the Annihilation Barge going down a couple points makes it a little more juicy. A one-man Destroyer Squad going up by a couple points. Heavy Destroyer Squad going up by a couple of points. Monolith going up a bit. Deathmarks going up a bit. And then also the Tesseract Vault going up a bit. Doomsday Ark coming down. And then the Obelisk coming down. So not really like crazy changes here, but while Necrons are good, they haven't been like outperforming, and they also saw some pretty big points increases earlier in the year. So overall pretty good changes for like more internal balance. And then we have the Orcs. So Orcs came out of the gate extremely strong, saw a bunch of points increases. Now we see massive points decreases across the board. Meganobs going back to where they used to be, I think much more viable here. Hunter-Rig and Kill-Rig coming down in points, and they are very good. Gorkanaut and Morkanaut coming down in points. Boyz and Beastnaga Boys coming down in points. A couple characters coming down in points. I think Orcs are going to be in a really good place here. Death Tread, Death Koptas, all some really nice choices now. All right, and then we see some changes to the Space Marines. So finally, a little bit of internal balance here. So basically, the Apothecary Biologist going up by 15 points. Eradicator squads going up by 5 and 10 for a full squad. And then also some changes to Gladius. We see the Assault Jump Pack Intercessors. If you take the 5-man unit, going up by 10 points. 10-man units staying the same. We see the Invader ATV coming down by 10, or Invictor Tactical Warsuits coming down by 15. So much more viable options now for some of the stuff that wasn't on the table before, or newer players running those Ballistus Dreadnoughts. I think the Invictor and the Ballistus now are looking a little more juicy than they were before. Probably going to see a couple more of them on the table. And then probably a little bit less of like the Gladius, like Dark Angels bricks. And then we see the Captain and Phobos armor coming down by a couple points. Not really very good. Heavy Intercessor squads coming down by 5 and 10 points respectively. Still looking really good right here, but probably not going to see a ton of them on the table. And then we see for the Outriders, the attached ATV coming down in points, but the Outriders staying the same. And then we get to some real juicy stuff right here. So basically the Reaver squad coming down by 10 points or 20 for a big squad. I think these are finally takeable right now. The Reavers with full boss lieutenant now is 130 points with basically a 3d6 charge at a deep strike. I was running these for a while and expecting points drops. They're finally here, and these are pretty juicy. But the big change for Ultramarines, Robute Guilliman coming down to 285. So he was previously 350, so that's a 65 point decrease. So we see the Lion has come down, Mortarion has come down, and Guilliman has come down. I think we're going to see a lot more Primarchs on the table. We also see all three of the Storm Speeders coming down by about 15 points apiece. So these are pretty juicy at 115, 125, and 150. We also see the regular Terminator squads coming down by 5 and 10 points for a full squad. Already pretty good, definitely now really good. We also see the suppressors coming down to 75. Probably going to see a couple more of them on the table as they're like a cheap unit that can actually be impactful in the game. And then a really nice change here, the Terminator Assault Squad coming down to 180 and 360. So basically saving 5 or 10 points. I think Terminators are getting more and more viable. And then finally, we see the Gladius Task Force. We see Fire Discipline going up by another like 5 or 10 points. And then the Stormlance Task Force coming down by 10 for Fainted Withdrawal and then up by a couple for Hunter's Instincts. So really we see the Dark Angels Gladius list going up in points. But overall, Space Marines coming down. And then we see an interesting change for the Vanguard Veterans, basically going up in points. But the majority of the people that were taking Vanguard Veterans were taking them in a Blood Angels list. And the main issue here was you could attach a Sanguinary Priest with Jump Pack, which is no longer an option. So I think this change was actually like a little bit of a sins of the past type thing, as Vanguard Veterans weren't that particularly great. And they're probably not going to be taken outside of Blood Angels realistically. So I think probably an unnecessary change. But regardless, overall, Space Marine changes, I like them for internal balance. I like that they stealth nerfed Dark Angels taking Gladius. But if you were taking a Gladius list before, especially with Guilliman, it's basically not costing you any extra points. So sort of like Dark Angels going up, but actual Gladius going down. And then we see Space Wolves. I think these are some welcome changes right here. A couple of units you didn't really see before going down in points. And then the stuff that we were seeing in every list going up. So Bjorn going up to 190. He was definitely undercosted before. Logan on foot going up to 115. And then Thunderwolf Cavalry going up to 120 or 240 respectively. Definitely needed to be changed. I just played into a Wolf Jail list over the weekend and it was extremely, extremely difficult to beat. He was running 24 Thunderwolf Cavalry with attached characters and they are extremely hard to punch through. I basically had to just let him slay a bunch of stuff and then avoid him for the rest of the game. And if it wouldn't have been for secret missions, I wouldn't have beat him. I think this is pretty realistic changes that needed to happen for Space Wolves. And next we see Tau Empire, a bunch of the Kroot stuff coming down, Riptides going up by a couple points, Piranhas going up by a couple points, Farsight coming down. Overall good changes, probably not going to be very impactful on most Tau lists. All right, and then we see Thousand Suns. So very happy to see this. It was definitely overdue. Basically all the stuff that was getting spammed going up. Armin up to 140, Armin on disc at 150, Exalted Sorcerer at 110, Exalted Sorcerer on disc 115, Infernal Master going up to 105, Magnus going up to 465, Mutalith Vortex Beast going up to 160, and then 5-man Rubrics going up to 110. We see the Forge Fiend going up to 145, we see the Sorcerer going up to 105, and then we see the 3-man Zangor Enlightened going up to 50. So basically all of like the spammed meta choices going up. Probably not going to be too impactful, maybe get like one less small unit in your Thousand Suns army, but still going to be very strong. Definitely some welcome changes. And then we see Tyranids, nothing too crazy right here. Things like Carnifexes, Von Ryan Leapers, Winged Hive Tyrant coming down in points. Old One Eye and Pyrovores going up a couple, but only for like the small unit of Pyrovores. We see the Lictor going up a couple points. Nothing too crazy right here for Tyranids. They're actually pretty strong and been doing quite well in the meta. So I think they're going to continue doing well, probably even better as a lot of the other top performing lists have gone up in points substantially. So good changes. And then we see World Eaters, Angron going up, Chaos Spawn going up, and then Master of Executioners going up, Demon Prince with Wings coming down. Nothing too crazy right here. Maybe going to have to drop like one Khorne Berserker unit down into some Jackals or something like that. But overall, nothing too crazy. So very good changes for the most part. I think Games Workshop has addressed some of the issues in the game, kind of brought down some of the top performing lists, brought up some of the internal balance in the lists. And overall, I'm looking forward to the new meta, the new points, and finally putting my Blood Angels on the table. We also have some rules changes. I'm sure we're going to sniff out a couple of stealth changes, as well as the stuff that was blatantly pointed out, like the Blood Surge moves. But let me know what you guys think of the new changes. How's this going to affect your army? Always like to hear back from you guys in the comments. And as always, special thanks to CMO Games for sponsoring the channel. Check out the link in the description to save 15% on most Games Workshop products. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.